During certain events in Pokemon Go, we get the ability to TM Frustration away on our Shadow Pokemon using Charge TMs. Now of course, the easiest solution is just to TM Frustration away on every single Shadow Pokemon you have, but some players don't have that many Charge TMs available, which is why in this video I'm going to be going over the best Pokemon to prioritize when this special feature becomes available. Thanks to the World Championship event in game right now, we currently have the ability to TM Frustration away on our Shadow Pokemon until August 20th at 8 PM local time. We also just recently got a new rotation of Team Go Rocket Grunts and leaders in Pokemon Go, which means new meta-relevant Pokemon are available right now in-game for you to hunt. So let's take a look at the relevant ones for raids and then for PvP, and then afterwards I'm going to go over some other Pokemon you might want to prioritize as well, like certain Shadow Legendaries. So first up, let's go over Shadow Darumaka, which evolves into Shadow Darmanitan. This is currently the best Shadow Fire type attacker in the game right now, even actually beating out Shadow Entei by just a small amount. Shadow Darmanitan is definitely a top Pokemon worth focusing on because it doesn't require any legacy movesets. Ideally you want to go with Fire Fang plus Overheat. Now in terms of IV spreads, when it comes down to the raid/gym meta, I would recommend anything above 3-star IVs, ideally with 15 attack, but honestly some of these Shadow Pokemon are really rare, so if you don't get anything that has 15 attack but it has something like 13, 12, 13, that is still a really good IV spread to have for the raid/gym meta. Although I will say if you're going to be using it for rocket battles, then 15 attack is also going to be important for breakpoints. Anyways though, moving on, let's talk about Magikarp next, which evolves into Gyarados. This Pokemon can be found from the water type grunts. Now Gyarados has relevance in the Open Great League, the Open Ultra League, the Master League, and the raid/gym meta. It's also pretty good to use against rocket grunts as well with Waterfall. Now for this Pokemon specifically, you won't want to evolve it right away unless you plan on using an Elite Charge TM because it has the exclusive Calm Day moveset Aqua Tail. There are going to be a few of these Pokemon in this video where I would recommend TMing Frustration away on them, but don't evolve them just yet, because you ideally want to wait to see if we actually get an event where we can actually evolve to get the moveset for free. If not, like for example if you get like the Hundo Shadow Magikarp, then yeah, in that situation I would just recommend evolving it and then just using Elite TM because that thing is going to be a beast. You're going to get so much use out of it, but for most players that's probably not going to happen, so I would just recommend holding onto this Pokemon, TM Frustration away on it, but don't evolve it just yet. Next up, let's talk about Shadow Electabuzz, which evolves into Shadow Electivire for the raid/gym meta. So this is only really relevant in the raid/gym meta. This Pokemon is really difficult to get though. So you can find this from the electric type grunt from the second encounter. So getting these second encounters from these types of grunts is really challenging. And I say challenging, but it's really just more of a rare occurrence. Just the other day, I was actually able to encounter an Electabuzz, but not only that, it actually ended up being a 98% IV spread with 15 attack. So I'm most likely going to max this Pokemon out in the future. Even though it doesn't have Master League relevance, I just think it's such a cool Pokemon to have. Like getting a 98% IV Shadow with 15 attack is incredibly rare. And then just Electabuzz by itself is a really rare encounter. So yeah, if you're able to get one with a good IV spread, then it is worth powering up for the raid/gym meta. It's not within like the top 3 right now for the electric type category, but it's probably the next best option. Like next to Shadow Raikou, this is the next best Shadow option you guys could power up. You ideally want to go with the moveset Thunder Shock plus Wild Charge, so no exclusive movesets here, which is nice. Following that, let's talk about Shadow Swinub, which evolves into Shadow Mamoswine. This does technically have a Calm Day exclusive moveset, but it's ancient power, so you don't really need to worry about it too much. You can just evolve this one as you get it with good IVs. Now when it comes down to this Pokemon, this has relevance in the Open Master League as well as the raid/gym meta, so if you do end up getting like a really high IV spread, you could potentially use it for that Master League format. When evolved to Shadow Mamoswine with Powder Snow plus Avalanche, this is currently the best ice type attacker in the game right now, like all around. It is better than all the mega options as well, so yeah, Shadow Mamoswine is a complete beast. The next Pokemon we're going to talk about is going to be Shadow Machop, which evolves into Shadow Machamp. This Pokemon has relevance in the Open Great League, Ultra League, and Master League, along with the raid/gym meta. Now Shadow Machamp used to be a little bit better in terms of the overall meta. We just recently got Shadow Conkeldurr, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, but this Pokemon is still worthy of powering up if you do get a good IV spread, whether that be for the Great League, the Ultra League, or the Master League. You could essentially use an Ultra League spread as a raid attacker too, because it powers up I think anywhere along like level 34, level 35-ish, so I mean that is pretty good. But not to mention that if you do end up getting like a really high IV spread, you could totally power it up for the Master League along with the raid/gym meta. Actually, I believe in Season 8 or Season 9, I used a Shadow Machamp in my Master League Premier Cup team to push for Legend, so this Pokemon is really good in Master League if you can actually build the right team for it. Not to mention the Shadow Shiny for Machop is also going to be available, so I've been trying to hunt this Pokemon down a lot more just for that Shadow variant. Like that would be so cool to power up. For those who don't know, Shadow Shinies are amongst the rarest Shinies to get in the entire game, so if you're able to get one 1, like, it's actually a really big deal. Now, I just mentioned that we would talk about Shadow Conkeldurr, so this evolves from Shadow Timber. This Pokemon has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats along with the Raid/Gym meta. Unfortunately, it just doesn't really have enough going on for it to be relevant in the Open Master League, but hey, like, it does still have a lot of relevance here. Now, unfortunately, this Pokemon is very, very rare to get. Like, I've seen reports of people going like 200, 300 crowns without even getting a single one. From the Team Go Rocket Takeover event recently, I was able to get 3 encounters with it, which I think was pretty good, and one of them actually ended up being an 87% IV with 15 attacks, so you know that Pokemon's going to get powered up in the future. In terms of its overall meta relevance right now, it does actually come pretty close to regular Terrakion. For both Shadow Machamp and Shadow Conkeldurr, you ideally want to have Counter plus Dynamic Punch and no exclusive movesets required. Next up, let's talk about Drillbur, which evolves into Excadrill. This is a pretty common Pokemon that I have been seeing available in Team Go Rocket Grunts from the ground type grunt specifically. So this Pokemon has relevance in the Open Great League, Ultra League, and Master League formats along with the Raid/Gym meta. It is an excellent Pokemon to use. Actually, it's also really, really good to use against Team Go Rocket Grunts. Like, it's probably one of my favorite Pokemon right now because it has access to Mud Slap. So yeah, this Pokemon is a top priority pick in my opinion. Like, you can use it so much against Team Go Rocket Grunts to farm even more Shadow Pokemon. So yeah, definitely a great Pokemon right there. One that I would really prioritize if you end up getting a good IV spread. When it comes down to the best moveset, you ideally want to go with Mud Slap plus Scorching Sands. But if you want to run it for PvP, then you want to go with Mud Shot instead as a fast move plus Scorching Sands. And then I believe Rock Slide. I think you could also run Drill Run as well as the ground type move instead of Scorching Sands, but it's kind of debatable. Next up, let's talk about Shadow Rhyhorn, which evolves into Shadow Rhyperior. This Pokemon has relevance in the Master League and the Raid/Gym meta. So very similar to Excadrill with Mud Slap, Shadow Rhyperior with Smackdown completely destroys the flying type grunts. Like, it is amazing to use, guys. So top priority Pokemon, whether or not you actually get it with good IVs, kind of irrelevant if you actually want to use it for Rocket Grunts or for the Raid/Gym meta. Comparatively, when we look at Mega Tyranitar and Mega Diancie, Shadow Rhyperior and Shadow Rampardos are basically on par with both of those Pokemon in their Mega forms, like just as their Shadow variants. Like, that is a crazy big deal in my opinion. Now, unfortunately, if you do want to get Rock Wrecker on your Rhyperior, you will have to wait until we actually have a special event to evolve it, or you can use an Elite TM to get it. I personally ended up getting a really good IV spread, so I just used an Elite TM. I thought it was totally worth it. I'm having so much fun using that Pokemon right now, so in my opinion, if the IV spread is worth it, then yeah, go for it. Next up, let's talk about Shadow Metang, which evolves into Shadow Metagross. We are going to have a Metagross Community Day coming up soon. Now, this Pokemon encounter is really rare, so very similar again to LuckyBunz and Rhyhorn. This is available from the second encounter. Not to mention, there's 3 potential Pokemon from that first encounter, and then 3 more Pokemon from that second encounter, so in total, you have to go up against 5 other Pokemon that you could potentially get, which is pretty difficult. Like, I have actually gotten Shadow Metang from the Team Go Rocket Grunts before, so it is possible, but it's a really rare Pokemon to get. But if you're able to get one before this upcoming Calm Day, and you can TM Frustration on it, evolve it to Metagross to get Meteor Mash without actually having to use an Elite TM, that is going to be a huge advantage. Shadow Metagross is currently the #2 Steel type attacker in the game right now, and not to mention, it also has relevance in the Open Master League as well, so if you end up getting a good IV spread, you could also use it there. Definitely a top Pokemon I would recommend TMing Frustration on regardless of the IVs if you do have it. The same goes for Shadow Beldum if you have it. That Pokemon hasn't been available in Rocket Grunts for a while though, so I can't imagine that many players do have them, but again, if you do, definitely a high priority Pokemon for the Raid/Gym meta. The next Pokemon we're going to talk about is going to be Ralts, which evolves into Gardevoir. This Pokemon mainly just has relevance in the Raid/Gym meta, no Master League relevance or a Great League or Ultra League unfortunately, but that being said, Shadow Gardevoir as a Fairy type attacker, complete beast. It's basically tied as the #1 Fairy type attacker in game compared to Enamorus in its incarnate form, which was also a really rare Pokemon to get. It's only had one available event, which was during a Valentine's Day in Elite Raid, so you can imagine that a lot of players probably didn't get their hands on one. But the nice thing about Gardevoir is that it doesn't require any legacy moveset, so the ideal moveset you want to go with is going to be Charm plus Dazzling Gleam. Once again, another top Pokemon I would really just focus on TMing Frustration away on regardless of the IVs. Like, Shadow Gardevoir is going to be totally worth it. Unfortunately for Shadow Ralts, this Pokemon is a little bit more on the rarer side from the Team Go Rocket Grunts right now because Shadow Alolan Vulpix is also available as an encounter. And in general, like the Fairy type grunts, they're not super common, so if you do run into one, it is pretty rare. Next up, let's talk about Shadow Dratini, which evolves into Shadow Dragonite. This Pokemon has relevance in the Open Great League, Ultra League, and Master League formats along with the Raid/Gym meta. Definitely a top level Pokemon to focus on. You can get this encounter from the Dragon type grunts, which are arguably the rarest type of grunt to see see in Pokemon Go. Not to mention, on top of all of that, you can also get this Pokemon potentially as a Shadow Shiny. So Shadow Shiny Dratini with good IVs in either the Great League, Ultra League, or Master League, oh my goodness, that would be amazing. Actually, I take that back, because Shadow Dragonite isn't as nice as a Shadow Shiny, but Shadow Dratini is a really cool one, so maybe you don't want to get the optimal IV spread on your Shadow Shiny, you want to just kind of keep that as a cool collection Pokemon. But you could also use it as a Shadow Dragonair, which has relevance in the Open Great League, so there is that possibility. If you end up getting a good IV spread, don't evolve it to Dragonite, just keep it as a Dragonair. There are going to be no exclusive movesets on Dragonair, and then same thing with Dragonite as well. There is technically a Calm Day moveset for Dragonite, but it's not good compared to just using Outrage or Dragon Claw. Now we do actually have two more potential encounters from the Dragon-type grunts. We have access to Shadow Bagon and then also Shadow Gibble. Both are going to be top-level Pokemon to focus on for the Raid/Gym meta, and they also have relevance in the Open Master League. Shadow Garchomp has a little bit more relevance than Shadow Salamence, but they both do have relevance now since Shadow Salamence got access to a new move pool this past season, so that's pretty good for it. Now, unfortunately, the downside to both of these Pokemon is that they do require Legacy Calm Day movesets in order for them to be meta-relevant. You can still use Shadow Garchomp as a meta-relevant Dragon-type attacker, but it has a Legacy Ground-type moveset called Earth Power, which you want to have if you want to use it as a Ground-type attacker in-game. Now, for Salamence, it's going to have the Legacy Calm Day moveset Outrage. Now, we did just recently have a Calm Day Classic a few months ago, so if you were able to get a good IV spread, you can actually evolve to get Outrage during December Calm Day this upcoming year, so that'll definitely be a Pokemon to hold on to and then evolve later on during this year. For Garchomp, we also had the ability to evolve it to get Earth Power during the Sinnoh Tour earlier this year, so there was an opportunity there as well. As far as the future outlook goes, I'm not really sure, but again, you can totally use it as a Dragon-type attacker and then decide later if you want to give it an Elite TM. I wouldn't really recommend doing that though unless you get a good IV spread, but either way guys, like basically every single encounter from the Dragon-type grunt is going to be good, most likely. You basically just have to get a good IV spread, so again, just comes down to RNG and consistency. Do as many of these as you can, like every single time you encounter one, make sure to get it done. And just in general, like there are so many good rocket grunts available right now in game. Now for those of you who don't have that many charge TMs available, what are actually the best ways to get charge TMs in Pokemon Go currently? So there's two top ways in my opinion. The first one is going to be from the GBL Win 2 reward. This is going to give you the chance of actually getting a charge TM, and to be honest, it is pretty common, so I would highly recommend going through and doing GBL to get these. Honestly, it's really not that bad either because you're going to farm a ton of Stardust at the same time, so a great way for free-to-play players to actually get more Stardust in game. Now the second way is going to be for Mega and 3-star raids, because charge TMs are going to be a guaranteed drop. So if you guys don't have that many players in your local area, you could just use Pokegenie to get more raid support. You know, go out and do 3-star raids. Some of them are going to be soloable, but you know, the Mega raids, you probably can't do that by yourself. In which case, you know, invite some people off Pokegenie, get the raid done using your free pass, and then you're going to get a guaranteed charge TM just like that. You do get one free pass every single day to use in Pokemon Go. You can also stack one for the next day if you want to, but you won't be able to use it that current day. So you definitely have some good opportunity to get more charge TMs between now and the event ends, so take advantage of it while you can. You know, if you have more raid passes available, we do have some pretty good Pokemon available in raids right now. Mega Kangaskhan is definitely a more popular Pokemon that I've been noticing people are going after, so if you want to focus on that, get some charge TMs at the same time, TM frustration away on some of these meta-relevant Pokemon, you're going to be good to go. Now before we actually dive into the PvP aspect of this video, I first want to go over how the IVs work for PvP in the Great League and Ultra League formats. So basically you want to have low attack IVs and high defense and high stamina IVs. The main reason for this is because this allows you to level up your Pokemon the most before it actually hits that CP limit for the Great League and Ultra League formats, 1500 and 2500 respectively. There are going to be some Pokemon that are going to be exceptions to this because their max CP does not actually reach that limit, in which case you would just want to get the best IVs possible, which would be 15, 15, 15, or the Hundo. In this video, we're going to be mainly focused on the 0, 15, 15 IV spread as a general one to go for, but if you do want to quickly pull up good PvP IVs for Great League and Ultra League, then you can use this search string on screen right now. You can also find this in the description as well. But now with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about which Pokemon are going to be the best for PvP to TM frustration away on. The first three Pokemon we're going to talk about are going to be the Johto starters, so Cyndaquil, Totodile, and Chikorita. Now we did actually have a Calm Day Classic for Cyndaquil a few weeks ago, so if you actually hold on to a good IV spread for this Pokemon, you can evolve it during December Calm Day to get the exclusive moveset Blast Burn. In my opinion, it's definitely one of the top Pokemon to TM frustration away on during this event. Like for PvP, like even if you're not into PvP that much, having access to this is insane. So yeah, even if the IV spread isn't like optimal, if you get something that's like decently good, then TM frustration away on that Pokemon because you may want to use it during the next rotation. Next up, let's talk about Totodile, which evolves into Feraligatr. This Pokemon has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats, some pretty strong relevance too if I do say so myself. Now when it comes down to Feraligatr, you do want to have the exclusive Calm Day moveset Hydro Cannon. This is very important for actually running it. For the fast move, you want to go with Shadow Claw, and then for the other charge move, you want to ideally go with Ice Beam, I believe. Next up, let's take a look at Chikorita, which evolves into Meganium. So this Pokemon has relevance relevant in the Great League and Ultra League formats, very similar to Cyndaquil and Totodile. Basically, all the Sinnoh starters are getting some love in PvP. But for Meganium, you want to have the exclusive moveset Frenzy planned, and then you ideally want to pair this with, I believe, Earthquake. So all three of those Pokemon are highly recommended to TM Frustration away on if you do end up getting good IV spreads. Even if you don't, like, I would still probably do maybe like one just to have it. The next few Pokemon aren't going to require any legacy movesets, so that is a good thing. We're going to talk about Magnemite next, which evolves into Magnezone with a Magnetic Lure module. This Pokemon has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats. Following that, we have Joltik, which evolves into Galvantula. This Pokemon has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats. Now for the Ultra League, when it comes down to Galvantula, this is one of those exceptions where you want to have the Hundo instead of the typical IV spread. To be honest, this Pokemon isn't ranked super well anymore, so I wouldn't prioritize TM and Frustration away on it unless you get like a really good IV spread. Next up, let's talk about Alolan Sandshrew, which evolves into Alolan Sandslash. Now when it comes down to Alolan Sandslash in the Open Great League format, this is definitely going to be a top priority. It is currently ranked within the top 50 right now, so definitely a great Pokemon to get your hands on if you do end up getting a good IV spread. Following that, we have Croagunk, which evolves into Toxicroak. You guys can find this from the Poison type Grunt. The other Pokemon available from the Poison type Grunt is going to be Hisuian Sneasel, which evolves into Sneasler. I feel like a lot of people don't realize this Pokemon is actually good, but it is pretty good. Speaking of really good Pokemon though, we also have Shadow Wooper, which evolves into Shadow Quagsire. So if you evolve it during this event too, you're going to get the exclusive Calm Day moveset Aqua Tail, which is important to have on this Pokemon. This is incredibly good in the Great League format, and it's also decently good in the Ultra League format. Now for Quagsire in the Ultra League, you do want to get the Hundo for this instead of the typical IV spread. Shadow Quagsire is currently ranked at number 7 right now in the Great League meta, so even if you don't get a good IV spread for Quagsire in the Open Great League, I would still recommend evolving your best PvP IV spread. You know, get Aqua Tail on Quagsire, and then you can decide later if you want to power it up and use it. You will actually have another opportunity as well, I believe, during December Calm Day, because Wooper was the featured Calm Day Pokemon, I believe, last November, so you can evolve and get the exclusive Calm Day movesets for Pokemon from the previous year as well. So if you do end up wanting to hold off on that, that is completely fine. The next Pokemon we're going to talk about is going to be Shadow Trapinch, which also is available right now as Shadow Vibrava from the Ground type Grunt as one of the second encounters. But if you were able to get Shadow Trapinch from, I believe, Sierra during the last rotation, then you may want to actually consider TMing Frustration away on this Pokemon if you ended up getting a good IV spread for PvP. It's going to have relevance in the Great League format mostly, but it also has relevance in the Ultra League format. It's currently ranked above the top 100 right now in both formats, so I mean, it's not like terrible, but it's not like a super amazing either like Quagsire was. We do have Shadow Pidgey available though next, which is going to evolve into Shadow Pidgeot, which has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League format. Now unfortunately, Shadow Pidgeot does not have relevance as a flying type attacker in the Raid/Gym meta. It just does not have enough going on for it. Now Pidgeot is going to be one of the exceptions when it comes down to the Ultra League. You want to focus on getting the Hundo instead of the typical IV spread for it. Following that, we have Gligar, which is relevant in the Open Great League. This is one of the top Pokemon to have right now, guys. Like, Shadow Gligar is amazing to use. I'm sure eventually at some point this Pokemon is going to get nerfed because it's just so OP right now, but yeah, if you want to TM Frustration away on any Pokemon, Gligar is going to be your boy. The next Pokemon is going to be Skorupi, which evolves into Drapion. This Pokemon has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats. In the Great League meta currently, it's not ranked super well, but I know this Pokemon also has some pretty good play in limited metas, so if you do end up getting a good IV spread, I do think it's actually worth TMing Frustration away on. The next Pokemon is going to be a top priority pick. That is going to be Skarmory, which has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats. Regular Skarmory is a little bit better than Shadow Skarmory, but if you want to have a little bit of spice going on, then yeah, go for the Shadow Skarmory. Shadow Skarmory is ranked at number 29 in the Open Great League, and then for the Open Ultra League, I think it's around the same placement. Comparing to the regular though, the regular is ranked at number 4, so yeah, significantly better than the Shadow. The next Pokemon is going to be Alolan Vulpix, which evolves into Alolan Ninetales. This Pokemon has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats. It's currently ranked within the top 100, so a pretty good Pokemon that I would actually TM Frustration away on. We have 2 more Pokemon to go over. The next one is going to be Bellsprout, which evolves into Victory Bell. This Pokemon has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats, so you can get Shadow Bellsprout from the Decoy Grunts. The way that you could actually do this is by equipping your Super Rocket Radar, and then going out to find Giovanni, you're going to run into Decoy Grunts. They're all going to have Shadow Bellsprout. This can potentially be Shadow Shiny as well, so keep that in mind. Not to mention, Bellsprout also had a Calm Day earlier this year, and if you want to wait to actually evolve to get Magical Leaf, which is used, I think, more in Ultra League opposed to Great League. In Great League, you just want to go with Razor Leaf on your Shadow. So you can either go with Leaf Tornado, Leaf Blade, or Acid Spray. I go with the combination of Leaf Tornado and Acid Spray. So Acid Spray is going to debuff the opposing Pokemon's defense by 2 stages, and then Leaf Tornado has a 50% chance, I believe, to debuff the opposing Pokemon's attack by 2 stages. But yeah, when it comes down to it, Shadow Bellsprout is going to be a top Pokemon to get rid of frustration on if you do have a good IV spread for for the Great League or for the Ultra League. And then depending on how you want to use this, you could definitely wait to evolve it to Victory Bell until we get December Calm Day, or you could just evolve it right now and just go with Razor Leaf, and I think that's totally a fine option. So with that being said, that pretty much covers all the Pokemon available from Grunts, but there are still going to be a few others that I would recommend removing Frustration on if you do have them. So to start things off, let's go over the Shadow Legendary Pokemon that have been featured within the past year. So first up, we have Shadow Articuno, which only has relevance in the Open Ultra League format. The next Pokemon is going to have a bit more meta relevance, that is going to be Shadow Moltres. So if you get rid of Frustration on this Pokemon, it has relevance as a really good fire type attacker in game. Plus, if you actually want to give it the Elite Charge TM to get Sky Attack, paired with Wing Attack as a fast move, you can also use this as a really good flying type attacker. Definitely ranked as one of the best flying type attackers in the game, next to Rayquaza with Dragon Ascent. In terms of a slightly better fire type attacker, though, we also have Shadow Entei, which was recently featured in raid battles. So again, this Pokemon is just mainly focused on the raid/gym, but no PvP relevance. To be honest, there isn't really like a huge difference between Shadow Entei and Shadow Moltres, but for the best moves that you want to focus on, Fire Fang plus Overheat on Shadow Entei, Fire Spin plus Overheat on Shadow Moltres. Now we also had Shadow Raikou available in raids as well recently, I think like 2 months ago, so if you were able to get even like a decent IV spread on this Pokemon, it is totally worth using, especially against the flying type Grunts. So I got a Shadow Shiny with, I believe, like decent IVs. It wasn't like 15 attack or anything close to that, but I still powered mine up to level 40 because, again, it's a Shadow Shiny. Like, those things are so rare to get. If you have like a Shadow Shiny on the sidelines, like that is an easy one to TM Frustration away on. But yeah, guys, when it comes down to it, Shadow Raikou, totally worth it. Now, I believe we also had Shadow Ho-Oh available in raids during January this year, so maybe some of you guys ended up getting a good one of that. Now, when it comes down to Ho-Oh, the only relevance this Pokemon has is going to be within the Open Master League. But with that being said, Ho-Oh with Incinerate is a really good fire type attacker to use, especially against the Team Go Rocket Grunts. And most recently, we also had Shadow Lugia available, and in this situation, I mean, if you got a Shadow Lugia, I wouldn't even focus on TMing Frustration away on this Pokemon, mainly because if you got a good IV spread, it's probably worth purifying for the hundo if potentially possible. And the reason I say that is because regular Lugia is extremely useful to use in the Open Master League, but Shadow Lugia, less than desirable. Following that, let's talk about Shadow Mewtwo next, which was available, I believe, in March. So we had that Pokemon very recently featured. This is without a doubt one of the best Pokemon, one of the top Pokemon to get rid of Frustration on. Shadow Mewtwo with Confusion plus Psystrike paired together with Shadow Ball is incredibly good. The only downside here is that Psystrike and Shadow Ball are both legacy movesets on Mewtwo, so it does require 2 Elite TMs, but I'm going to tell you this right now, I have given so many Elite TMs to Mewtwo, and I have used my Shadow Mewtwo so much when it comes down to the poison type grunt encounters. Like, I destroy, like literally destroy with Shadow Mewtwo. And you know, to be honest, Confusion is doing most of the damage, I'm not gonna lie, but at the same time, like when it comes down to that final encounter, like their third Pokemon, I just completely one-shot it with Psystrike. So yeah, when it comes down to it, Shadow Mewtwo, get rid of Frustration, consider giving it that Elite Charge TM as well, totally worth it. Following that, we have Shadow Kyogre, which, I mean, seriously, if you don't have Frustration removed on your Shadow Kyogre, you need to do that. You probably only got one when it was available. I believe that was January to March, and then we got Shadow Groudon from March up until very recently. So yeah, Shadow Groudon, Shadow Kyogre, 2 top picks. Like, TM Frustration away on both of those Pokemon. Shadow Kyogre is the 3rd best water type attacker in the game, but it's actually going to be the #1 best shadow type attacker in the game. The first 2 are Primal Kyogre and Mega Swampert, so I mean, technically Shadow Kyogre is the GOAT. Now, do you need to actually have Origin Pulse on your Shadow Kyogre? To be honest, I would recommend it, but at the same time, you could definitely get away with using Surf. Now, for Shadow Groudon, do you want to have Precipice Blades on it? So, I mean, yes, you do, but at the same time, you could just use Earthquake temporarily if you don't have a good IV spread on your Shadow Groudon. Eventually, this Pokemon will come into Shadow Raids at some point. I don't know if it's going to be anytime soon, but I know at some point we're going to get it, which then at that point, you can definitely raid for it a lot harder, you know, get a good IV spread, then use your Elite TM to get Precipice Blades. But as of right now, I mean, if you want to have access to the best ground type attacker in the game, regardless of IVs, then yeah, Precipice Blades, go for it, and you know, take advantage of the extra DPS you're going to get compared to everybody else. Even compared to Shadow Garchomp with Earth Power, like Shadow Groudon with Precipice Blades is like 5 points higher, so yeah, that's a big difference. Now we also had the Shadow Regis available, Shadow Regirock, Shadow Regice, and Shadow Registeel. When it comes down to Shadow Registeel, yes, definitely make sure to get rid of Frustration on that Pokemon specifically. That is like the best of the Regi trio. But when it comes down to it, compared to their regular counterparts, especially Registeel, the regular is far better than the Shadow. But, you know, the possibility of getting a good IV spread on your Shadow because the IV floor was 666 when it was available from Giovanni, you may actually have a better Shadow Registeel opposed to a regular variant. When it comes down to Shadow Regirock and Shadow Regice, that's a little bit more debatable. I wouldn't worry about those two as much. And then in the current rotation right now, we have Shadow Cresselia available from Giovanni. It is definitely worse compared to its regular counterpart, so if you already have a Cresselia built for the Great League with good IVs, then I wouldn't really worry about the Shadow too much. There's actually 4 more Pokemon I want to go over that aren't legendary Pokemon, but 3 of them do require Legacy Comday movesets. So first of all, let's go over Shadow Turtwig, which evolves into Shadow Torterra. This is going to need the Legacy Comday moveset Frenzy Plant. This Pokemon with Razor Leaf plus Frenzy Plant is probably your next best option compared to Kartana when it comes down to using it against Team Rocket Grunts, right? So for anything that's weak to grass types, especially the ones that are double weak to grass type, like the Rock and Water or the Ground and Water, oh my goodness, like Shadow Torterra with Razor Leaf is going to destroy them if you don't have Kartana. Next up, let's talk about Shadow Mudkip, which evolves into Shadow Swampert. You want to have the exclusive Comday moveset Hydro Cannon. Shadow Swampert has relevance in the Great League, Ultra League, and Master League metas, not to mention it's a really good Pokemon to use against Team Rocket leaders. The reason why this Pokemon is so good is because it has access to extremely spammy movesets, right? So for the fast move, you want to go with Mud Shot, and then plus either Hydro Cannon, but if you don't have Hydro Cannon, you could also use Muddy Water. So technically you don't even need to have the exclusive Comday moveset on Swampert if you want to use it against like Team Rocket leaders. You could also totally use your Ultra League spread for the Rocket battles as well, so you get a lot of dual functionality out of this Pokemon. It's seriously one of my top recommendations for all Pokemon in game. Like Shadow Swampert, just Swampert in general, is one of the goats. Now we also have Shadow Piplup, which evolves into Shadow Empoleon. This Pokemon has relevance in the Great League and Ultra League formats. It's not really used as much for the Raid/Gym meta, but you could use it as like a water type attacker with Waterfall plus Hydro Cannon. And then finally, our last Pokemon is going to be Shadow Craniados, which evolves into Shadow Rampardos. This Pokemon was featured during the last rotation of Team Rocket Grunts, and it was available in 1-star Shadow Raids for like a small amount of time. Now when it comes down to this Pokemon, if you were able to get one, like regardless of the IV spread, I mentioned earlier that, Shadow Rhyperior and Shadow Rampardos are comparable to Mega Tyranitar and Mega Diancie. Shadow Rampardos also benefits from having the fast move Smackdown, very similar to Shadow Rhyperior, so using this against the flying type Grunts is probably even better than Shadow Rhyperior, because it has better DPS. So when it comes down to it, both do have their advantages, but honestly, Shadow Rhyperior, Shadow Rampardos, MVPs, man, they are so freaking good. Anyways, with that being said, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Hopefully you guys did find it helpful. This was my first time making this type of video on the channel, so of course, any feedback is welcomed in the comment section down below. Things you want to see for next time, ways that I can improve this format. As always, I really do appreciate it. Now, if you guys do want to check out some more content, I'm going to recommend these 2 videos right here. But before you go, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon in the next one.